welcome to another episode of the Gentleman's Brotherhood. My name is Juan Sepulveda, and thank you for taking the time to join us as we discuss different topics about being a better man today. Today, I have the pleasure of being here with two excellent gentlemen, and I look forward to the conversation we'll have. I'm going to start by introducing my good friend and co-host tonight, Alberto Mella. Alberto, good evening.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And today we have the honor of being here with a friend and brother who has a very cool story to share with us today. His name is Alex Ruiz. Alex was the champion, or is the champion. He was in season 5 of Forged in Fire, which is a bladesmith program. And tonight we're going to explore a little bit of this topic. Alex, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It's exciting. I've been refreshing my memory by watching the episode once again. I even shared it with my kids, and they were super excited about it. And I can't help but to see a lot of parallels when I looked at your craft and look at the different things that we discuss in our efforts to become better men and become gentlemen. And before we agreed to record, I had mentioned that Alberto wrote an article for the Gentleman's Brotherhood regarding tempering the metal and regarding the quench of the metal. So I wanted to start first by talking a little bit about the physical aspect of your craft, and then exploring a little bit some of the allegorical parallels that we may find in it. So could you just briefly let us know how you describe your craft to someone who's never seen what you do?
Now, I can get lost in the weeds with description, but normally I just tell people I get things hot and I hit it with a hammer until it starts to look pretty. That's pretty much how I'll break it down for people. And it's kind of how it is. It's like you start off with a simple bar of steel, very, very plain materials, and you can manipulate that with heat, with the hammer, or whatever tooling you're using, and turn it into something beautiful. Rough ashlar, perfect ashlar, wink, wink. You take these things and you make them better based on the working tools you're given. So, and that's the cool thing about it is I can take a bar of steel that would otherwise be passed up, for junk. Early on when I was using recycled material, and I would turn it into something else. And yeah, that's really it. I'm just get stuff hot and hit it with that hammer until something pretty starts to emerge from there. And sometimes I want it to look gritty, sometimes.
You have a vision and you work at your material until that vision gets closer and closer.
Yeah.
It's like right off the bat, you can find some parallels there with life itself. It's like you take something that is rough, something that is in its rudimentary nature, and you have a vision of how it can become better out, or how it can serve a purpose in your life. And then you start working at it until it actually becomes, or it becomes materialized in alignment with your image.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes that includes drawing out a design, because there are times when I wing it, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. I won't be one of those people that professes, oh, every time I wing it, magic happens. I'm like, oh, well, I'll be honest. There's times I'll wing it and that ends up in the trash, But I took a shot. I took a shot. I failed. But what's that line? It's like, I rather you aim for the stars and miss than not take that hit and hit. You know what I mean? So take that shot and hit, something like that. I'm butchering that awesome quote, but you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And I do it all the time too. I find myself saying, it's like that quote, and then I'm like, oh my God, why did I mention the quote? And then I go through the quote, I destroy it.
Yeah, that's what I just did right now. Man, it's a bump.
No, but it was good. I mean, I completely understand. It's that effort that you put behind the, like following that intuition. And I identify with that 100% because as an artist, I've been able to see the pattern. When I plan my pieces and I have a starting point for them, most of the time. So if you look at the percentages, when I actually plan for a execution of a vision, the results for the majority of the time are good, are something that I'm proud of. But even though I know that, I still have to follow my instinct. Like, oh, you know, I think I can do something with this. Pick it up, start working on it, see where it goes. Sometimes it yields great fruit. Other times is, like you said, it goes straight to the garbage. But it's part of giving yourself that opportunity to work with it and be artistic, be spontaneous.
Yeah, exactly. In you know, I don't call myself an artist. There's people in the bladesmithing community that they're like, oh, I'm an artist or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I mean, not to denigrate people who I wouldn't really say you're an artist or craftsman, but some people just, I look at their work, I'm like, there's so much detail, there's so much artistry to the piece that they're working on. But I never call myself an artist. I just say, you know, I'm a craftsman. You know, and even when I do sculpture, I don't even say I'm an artist, but I have a vision, and sometimes I'll get artsy, and I say that with the biggest air quotes and an apostrophe ART with an E and an umlaut just to make it a little bit more art, you know. But you know, I have an idea, and sometimes I want to express or convey an emotion with the piece, but yeah, I'm trying to be artistic, right? I've never called myself an artist. Now, what you do, like you're like, I'm like, I like that. That's, to me, that's art, you know?
Well, it's funny that you say that because I see what you do and I consider you an artist. So it's, especially the other day I was looking through your Instagram, and we'll put links on it on the description for those who haven't seen it yet. And I saw, it looked like a wand. I don't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Is it a wand?
Depends. Does it have a skull on it?
Yes.
Yes, that was a wand. Or a pointer. I say pointer or wand. Some people. So I have to walk some of these little lines because some people are like, oh, it's a wand, and I get certain subset of people that are attacking me for daring to make such a thing, and I'm like, look, it's also a pointer. You know, if you want to go bibbity bobbity boop with it, that's your prerogative. I use them in the class to point at stuff because I have a tendency to do this when I'm teaching, and doing this at 1600 degrees, about a couple inches away from your finger. You know, well, I mean, I can't feel anything anymore, but you know, I'll use that little pointer to indicate where someone's like, hey, hit here or keep an eye on this. So that's what I started making them as, and then someone said, oh yeah, they look like they'd be wands, and I'm like, wands. And then I started doing collaborations with another artist, with an artist on Instagram, and she does the artsy stuff. She puts all kinds of gems and stones and sculptural work onto those base pieces of steel and really brings them to life. But yeah, the skull one, yeah, that was fun. And I actually posted a video on how I forged the skulls.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, so it's if you open my IGTV, it's one of like maybe 4 videos I have on there. So, and it's like my process to forging a skull, and people are like, it's like, can you slow that down? I'm like, no. I'll have to go back and do another video, but yeah, I'm thinking about doing a more in-depth version. But you know, I learned it from someone else, so I'm like, here's a guy who already did a video. Watch his video on it, because my process is what he's doing. I've just taken a little bit more and added to it.
You know, in the Gentleman's Brotherhood, we talk about a lot of the different elements of becoming a better man and to elevate yourself to a better evolved version of yourself. And oftentimes that requires you interacting with other people that came before you, that did something that you want to do, or that are involved in something that you did, almost like a mentorship or an apprenticeship. And there's many times there's great importance of having that one person that actually helps you break through and become better at whatever you're trying to do. What has been your experience with that sort of relationship, mentorship, apprenticeship, and things of the like?
A lot of times blacksmithing and bladesmithing can be insular. You're very, very, you're doing this on your own. You learn. Now we live in a technological age, so a lot of people can learn online, but there's no good analog for someone teaching you, someone mentoring you, someone really who knows what they're doing, telling you where you're messing up, because you can mess up and not see it, but having someone to be there objectively and say, hey, I'm seeing a little bit of a wobble here, or a twist there, or this, you should probably do this a little differently. It'll make your life easier. And I didn't have anyone teaching me anything until like maybe I was a year and a half into my journey. And then I met another bladesmith, Tobin Nieto, who was on Forge and Fire season 2, episode 8, the Pirate Cutlass champion. He's from San Antonio. I took a class with him when I was early on, when I was just starting to make knives, and it definitely gave me a lot of better ideas to forging. And then, of course, like my styles started to come into play. I diverged big time. I started going for more collector grade stuff, and then I started finding myself in like, why don't I do a little bit of both? But as far as mentor, I would say I've had a lot of people in my circle that are fantastic bladesmiths, blacksmiths, but none of them like really been mentors, because I don't see them very often. They live all over the US, all over the world even. One who's been very instrumental, and I'll always give him props, is brother Ray Kirk out of Tahlequah, Oklahoma. He's a master bladesmith, Cherokee native too. He's the only Native American mastersmith, I believe, in the American Bladesmith Society. He's been on Forged and Fire twice. He's kind of the fan favorite. Everyone seems to remember him as the guy who finished an hour before all the young guys and sat down and ordered coffee and donuts.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
That was a good episode. Yes.
Yeah. Ray's a really good friend of mine. And he at 73 years old, all these young guys are looking at him like, what? He finished an hour before everyone else and just sat down and placed an order for coffee. I don't have it, but I have one of his mugs. It's just like him holding a knife. It's just, now can I have my coffee? I don't have it right now, but normally I'd be drinking from that. But I'm gonna see him this weekend. He's driving down from Oklahoma, and he's bringing me some goodies from the shop. So he's bringing me some steel, some antler, because he knows I do a lot of integrals, and he's the one who taught me how to do that particular style of knife that I'm kind of pursuing a lot more. I'm trying to find that niche and kind of make my own little place in there somewhere. But yeah, definitely, I would say him and my shopmate definitely are the mentors, because while my shopmate and I are wildly different stylistically, we have a very similar approach to quality control and forging. At the end of the day, if you don't have that, you don't really have a good piece. If your quality control is there, then what are you doing? And he is super meticulous about quality control. And if he sees something wrong with the knife that I'm making, it may look clean and shiny and polished and got my name on it, got mammoth ivory handles on there. He'll look at it and he'll find something. He can point out where something might be a little bit like, hey, I can feel this little raised area. You might want to sand that back a bit, or you got a little kink in the blade, just a slight bit. He'll keep me honest for sure. And so will Ray, and so will all the other mastersmiths I know, who have kind of worked as like mentors in passing, I should say.
That's great. And what is your like instant reaction to feedback like that? Do you take it in stride, or do you find it difficult to accept it or absorb it?
You got to take criticism, especially in this field. If you're doing it as a hobby, some people are like, well, I'm not doing this as a professional. I'm not doing it to sell. But if you're a maker and you got customers, which is what I do, what I got, I want to make sure my quality control is there. I don't want someone to say, oh, I like this knife. I just wish there wasn't this XYZ issue, which I know some of my earliest pieces had those. And it's funny because I know a couple of customers that I've kept in touch with from the very first few knives that I sold, where I know that the spine is too thick, the handle might be a little shorter than it should have been, or the profile isn't exactly as nice as I would have wanted it, but they love it. They say this, where I'm seeing all the flaws in the world, they're just like, nah, I use this knife all the time. I take care of it. This one guy, I see him every year at a show that I do, and he always brings one of the first knives I ever sold, brings it to me. He's like, yeah, put this through a ringer, and then look at how it's still doing. So every year I take a picture of it, and I get to see it's like aged a little bit more every time I see
Nice.
it. So
You
yeah,
probably make
it's
an animation after a while.
yeah, I've got like, let's say 3 or 4 pictures of it from every year. But yeah, no, I gotta take it in stride. One of the guys, Harvey Dean, who's probably one of the most amazing bladesmiths in the world. He's up there in like the top 20 knife makers in the world. He's out of Rockdale, Texas, and I had a knife. This is when I submitted 3 knives of my best quality at the time to pass my Lone Star rank membership in the Texas Knife Makers Guild, and they judge every part of your blade for that, and you got to pass, right? So after I passed, I came up to Harvey and I asked him, what do you think of these? And he's like, you want my opinion or do you want a critique? And I said, a critique. And he looks at the knives and he looks at me and says, all right, Alex, I'm gonna need you to have to sit down. Not in a bad way, but like he at the time he was the sitting president of the American Bladesmith Society, and also one of the most well-renowned bladesmiths in the world. So he's going to see everything and then some, because his quality is beyond what I'm doing now. And for every issue I had, he told me, here's how to avoid it in the future. And that's what you need. There's constructive criticism, and then there's just jerks. Those I don't like. It's kind of hard to avoid the trolls. Those I'm like, man, shut up.
Yep. Especially online.
I try to avoid them. They're there. But I really haven't dealt with it on Instagram, really. You know what I mean? It's kind of surprising. I've had it a little bit on Facebook for some reason. I don't understand why Facebook and not Instagram, but there you go.
Yeah, there's a different dynamic there for sure.
Yeah.
I find the same with Instagram and Facebook. Facebook, it has a lot of people who feel very emboldened and they feel very cavalier in their feedback or their opinion. But as an artist, I think it's important for you to have that confidence. And on the show, I have to say, when I was looking at that episode where you're alongside some tough competitors, there are great bladesmiths next to you trying their very darndest to beat you.
For real. Andrew Wozniak and Bill Van Hetteren, the 2 guys that went out before Mike and I, are real professionals. Like, Bill's a journeyman ABS member, American Bladesmith Society member, and Andrew is just some sort of a prodigy with the hammer. I mean, he's like at 60,000 followers or something now on Instagram.
Oh, wow.
Him losing Forged in Fire did nothing to slow him down. This guy just took that and just went, boom. He's a better bladesmith than I am. I'll level with you. I'm like, he's doing awesome work. He's a fantastic smith. Mike is doing awesome work. He's got a shop. He's close to, I think he's close to retiring or wanting to retire, so he can just like focus on doing decorative stuff and everything. And we keep in touch here and there. But yeah, no, it was funny because when Mike and I went to for the final round, we went out to dinner the night before we filmed that final episode, or final half of the episode. And so we went to a restaurant I really like in Brooklyn. I said, let's go try this place out, get some fish, get something to eat, right? Get a drink, because we're both on edge. And so he's like, I don't know how us 2 yahoos made it to the end. I was like, because at the time we were both hobbyists, and it's just, you never know. That show will level the playing field. And that's what keeps you humble. I mean, I think one of the best reactions think to not making it to the final round was they brought back Bert Foster, who's a mastersmith. Not only is Bert a mastersmith, if I remember correctly, Bert was on the judging panel for one of the judges to get their mastersmith way back when. So he is literally judging the work of the guy who gave him his mastersmith approval. So,
Wow.
but Bert didn't make it. There was a crack in the spine, and he says, "Hey," he's like, "It's easy to say, don't be afraid to lose when you win," but he says, "I'm saying it now as a loser. Don't be afraid to lose." And I'm like, he's a mastersmith. He's great work. Nothing to prove at this point, but you know, that kind of, hey, you got to take it in stride. You know, this playing field is so evened out on the show. It's insane, especially for the newer episodes are just insane. So
there's a lot about the episodes that we as viewers are not privy to. There's a lot of the process that we miss.
Oh yeah.
And that's what I would like to ask about that. What do you think is something that, you know, viewers should understand about bladesmithing that is lost with all this cutting and production?
The fact that we actually don't rush anything in the shop, or we shouldn't. I mean, when the show first came out, the idea of forging a knife from start to finish from a plain bar of steel kind of seemed a little crazy, because everyone kind of takes their time and everything with it. Nowadays, the standard is like, if you couldn't forge this big blade in an hour, there's something wrong with you, which is a little bit ridiculous. But, you know, so if I'm using a power hammer in my press, yeah, it's going to get done quick, but you're losing a lot of how much time it actually goes into making sure we avoid the issues that you see in the show, like delaminations, cracks, getting in such a hurry that you forget to drill your holes before heat treating, things of that nature. You know, there's so much that you lose in the show because you know, those little bits where they ask you where they're interviewing the person and they're talking in present tense about something that's happening in the cut. That's like, we filmed that after everything is over. So I'm having to remember something I did 3 hours ago, and the producer's there with his little notes. He's like, Alex, you got to speak in present tense, like it's actually happening. I'm like, man, I don't even know what happened 2 minutes ago. You want me to recall what happened? That whole 3 hours ran by like a blur to me. And so, yeah, you do lose a lot of that. And they have you sitting down answering questions for like 45, 50 minutes, and you're only going to hear 20 seconds total of that in the show. So, I mean, that and silly bits that never made it in to the show. There was so many funny things that happened on our episode that we'll probably never see the light of day. Us goofing around in the judging room while they're actually deciding which one of us is going home. We're goofing off, making fun of the judges as we're sitting there, and it's some golden bits that'll never air. And because we were all so nervous, we were trying to lighten the mood. And I even dropped into, like, if you all remember Julia Childs, the chef, the French chef, was her show back in the day. They were asking me why I wasn't doing anything. I was doing the canister Damascus, and you have to heat it up. You really, really heat it up. I like to leave it in there for like 20 minutes just to make sure that it's solid. So when I go set my presses, set my welds on the press, I don't have the issue where you pop it open and all of a sudden it looks like a broken Pez dispenser and all your pieces are falling out of it. I want to make sure it's solid. So they got mad at me, kind of. They're like, Alex, you're not doing anything. I said, yeah, I'm trying to make sure this is going to weld. I want to make sure it's heated all the way around. And they're trying to get me to explain a process that's so straightforward. And they said, well, can you explain that a little bit more? And I'm like, you mean the part where it's just let it get hot? and then I had to break it down. There's like, well, can you give us a little bit more to that? I said, it's like rotisserie steel. You put it in the oven for 300 degrees and turn it every 15 minutes. Huzzah! And so they never had that. They never aired that bit. But it's you lose so much in the show. And I think not just the creative process, but the funny bits, the parts that really showcase that we're not just nervous, which we are, but the way some of the competitors deal with that. is absolutely hilarious, you know, and I wish that those would be like a blooper reel of all the stuff that has happened, because my God, I have stories, some I probably still can't say, but stories that happen on set that, you know, I'll say off camera, but you
How long was the entire experience?
day one, we fly in. Day two, we film that first half where it's like you make your knife, and then day two, you make the handle, right? And day three, they test everything. And each of those days, you know, it is 3 hours. When they say 3 hours, they don't. There's no turning back the clock. There's no stopping the clock. They mean it. But it's all the lead up to that: pre-interviews, post-interviews, setting up lighting, setting up cameras, all the stuff that happens outside those 3 hours. That's what takes 8 hours of your day. You know what I mean? So by the end, we get to set at 7 o'clock. We're getting back to the hotel at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. We're exhausted. There's no way we could do the whole show in one afternoon. You know, just not going to happen. Not with the logistics of production.
And it's
And then
interesting. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and then, you know, you go to the final round, you film for 5 days, you fly in whenever they decide they want you. They fly in, they film that final round in one afternoon, they kick you back to your hotel, you fly out the next day. So it's literally about, I don't know, like a week and a half of your time almost when you think about it. So yeah, I'm lucky I have the job that I do, because I was able to get a lot of leeway on that. And yeah, it was fun, but I might do it again.
No, that's exciting. I loved seeing the whole dynamic. Like when I mentioned earlier about the episode, when I was watching the episode, I did notice your confidence. You had a level of confidence. You were presenting at a challenge, obviously, but
Yeah.
I could see you were going through your mind. Okay, I first have to draft whatever concept I want for it, and you took care of that step. And then you have all the different steps. You looked very comfortable in the process, and
I'm glad it looked like that.
it doesn't mean like when we talk about courage, like courage doesn't mean, you know, not having fear or not being nervous. It's despite that fear, despite the tremors or whatever, just going at it and getting things done.
Yeah, for sure. You got to approach it time wise, like just what's the challenge, how much time do I have? And I was very, very regimental about how much time I needed for XYZ. And I don't know where in the show, because it said 4 years experience in the episode. I don't know where that number came from, because I had only started blacksmithing at all in 2015, and I filmed in 2017, and I had only been making knives for maybe a year at best. So it's kind of weird that there's a 4-year mark, and I'm like, I have no idea where that number came from, because I started in 2015. So yeah, I was super nervous. I'd practiced right before the show, forging something out. Then they said you gotta make a hidden tang, and that's something I still to this day don't like making, style knife. And you know, I just had to be very methodical in how I did it. And I had a moment in round two, which will never show, because my friend was having a harder time, because they focus on whoever's having the worst time.
Yeah,
physically or visually having the worst time. I was having the worst time in my head, and I almost walked off set in the second round, thinking I wouldn't have enough time. But something just told me push through, get it done, and I did. And you know that, you know, here we are having a conversation about it.
Right. So what a life lesson. Like here you're under pressure. You are in one of the most visible moments of your life, because you are before God knows what size audience, right? And
they told us. It was funny. Like you were about to say, you're in front of you. Well, I don't know who it was. Some jerk on set said, it's like, all right, so we got the cameras already here. I'm like, I'm looking around. There's like 40 people on set you'll never see on the show, but there's 40 people running around at any given time. And the guy, I don't remember who it was. He's, all right, once we get started, we're going. When that camera turns red, the little light on the camera turns red or whatever it is, he says, this is going to be viewed all over the world. Good luck. I was like, you
Don't say
son of
that.
a... I was like, you
Great.
I don't know who it was, but thank you for scaring the daylights out of me, you jerk.
They were probably hoping for some more of those good TV moments where like now you're really scared. It's like that's gonna make for good TV.
Yeah, it did.
Brutal.
Now, Alex, turning
What's
it
up?
around, we have been speaking about your experiences and what you have learned and mentoring you have received.
Mhm.
Turning it around, have you been a mentor? Do you have mentees? Do you have a protege that is looking at your work right now and say, I want to be the next Alex Ruiz?
Well, first off, I tell him set your sights higher. Second, the second, I would be like, well, here's the thing. I teach a lot of classes, and I have a lot of students who come back quite a bit. I have this young student in my class. Um, he's been, man, his parents really love the fact that he's found something he can really engage in. Um, and he takes almost all of our classes that we offer through the shop that I've got, my shopmate uses, and that he's at all the time. So we have a location to teach, and this young man is in there all the time. I'm watching him develop, coming in with no experience to, hey, something's not looking right. How do I address this, or whatever, to now he's self-correcting all those little things that he would be asking me, like, well, how do I fix this, or how to, he's fixing it before I can get to him and tell him, hey, you might want to. And before I can get to him, I see the little gear turn where you stop, you look at your work, turn the tongs around, hit it in a different direction, and he's got it. And I'm like, and because he's so young, most of our students are like 18 plus, or between like 30 and 45, 50. So we have mostly in that range. So students as young as him, really do stand out because there's not as many of them by comparison. So yeah, he's definitely, I definitely say that I don't say I'm his mentor, but I've taught him enough. He's taken enough classes that might fall into that category. But yeah, I like watching students self-correct. It's because for me, that's the moment things click for you. That's the moment you no longer need your hand being held. You start to analyze something from a whole different perspective, and these little gears start going off, and you're looking at your work. And instead of asking, sometimes they'll just look, and then they'll start, well, if I hit here, this changes here. What if I hit, and then they start figuring this stuff out on their own. And normally it's on my walk to them. Like I'm walking towards them to like, all right, buddy, this is where you're messing up. That's not what I say, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, okay, I'm seeing your struggle. I'm heading over there. And then all of a sudden that little gears, I see it click, and then they start fixing it on their own the right way, or at least the way that, I would objectively say is the right way. But, they start fixing stuff. And I love seeing that part, that little moment where someone can just, the aha moment. There it is. That's what I'm talking
Eureka.
about. Exactly.
Yeah. Whenever you have those kinds of dynamics, I find it fascinating to see that you don't always have to tell someone, okay, here's what you're doing wrong. Here's what you need to do next. Most people, especially when you are close to them or whenever you have some sort of relationship with them, all you need to do is to start like having a dialogue or having a conversation and asking some questions. Like, what led you to this decision? Like, I'm not privy to the previous steps. Can you give me some insight as to how you got here? And sometimes in that, when you give people room like that, it's almost like you prompt them, but they should let them do the work. It can be way more effective than if you actually go, like you mentioned, and hold their hands and actually do the moves for them. So I'm glad to hear you mention that.
Yeah.
Now, in the spirit of exploring your development as an individual, right?
Yeah.
Now that you're an adult man and you have things that you are doing that are gaining you some recognition, right?
Yeah.
You consider an artist by some of us. What would you say is something that perhaps you wish you had more exposure to earlier on? Something that perhaps could have given you a better chance at reaching some of your goals sooner or with less uh, friction. What comes to mind when I mention that?
I think for me, I think classes. If I had taken maybe a intensive blacksmithing class at, like, I don't know, maybe the John C. Campbell School, or made the journey to go to Thomas Latane's shop, who's just an amazing blacksmith. The work that he does is akin to what I consider perfection in this blacksmithing world. And I wish I had done that, or maybe gone to the American Bladesmith Society school and learned some of their techniques. Although I wonder how much that would have changed my approach and my style, because early on I didn't have anyone. I was kind of just figuring stuff out. So a lot of what I did developed on its own, versus if I'd spent time around one person or one style of teaching, that my style would have just become kind of cookie cutter, like what everyone else is doing. So I wonder that, I think about that too. I'm like, man, I wish I would have taken classes. And I still want to go and take classes with these guys, with the brother Steve Schwartzer, who's an American American Bladesmith Society mastersmith from Florida. He's the longest serving member of the ABS. And he calls me his brother from another mother for obvious reasons. Yeah. I don't know if it's AF and AM down there, but yeah. So I want to take a class with him. He's inventive. He doesn't stick to one style. He keeps on finding ways to innovate, and he's been doing this since the 70s. You know what I mean? So yeah, I wish I would have taken classes. I wish I would have learned from other people, because as cool it is to say, oh, I'm self-taught, I did that myself, nobody taught me. I mean, it's cool to say that, but at the same time, you build up a lot of mistakes before you get to that point. I've got buckets full of failures of pieces that just didn't work. And if I had someone teaching me, I probably would have saved a lot of money getting to that point. Let's not forget mistakes cost money, and I spent so much in mistakes early on as a maker. So yeah, that's the thing. Classes, learn from others who know what they're doing.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Now, if I were to ask you, there are men out there that are listening or watching this conversation, and maybe it's not blacksmithing for them. Maybe it's something else that they're interested in doing, but perhaps they may feel that it seems unsurmountable. It seems like very challenging. I'm afraid of taking that next step. Like, what would you say to someone like that in light of what you've learned in your own journey?
I mean, you gotta take a chance somewhere. I mean, good to go back to the quote that I butchered and won't do it again, because I will butcher it a second time. It's very
perfect.
Okay, that one. Yeah, it does. But I've failed not just in my shop in private. I have failed in front of crowds, like huge crowds. I tested for my journeyman smith performance test, and I have a crowd around me, 50 some odd people. Some of the best makers in the world essentially are in this crowd, watching my knife get put through its paces, so that I can go on to submit my 5 later on for my journeyman rank in the ABS. I didn't make the cut. No pun intended. There was the slightest of glinting on the edge of my knife, because I pulled my knife edge so thin that it held up, but the problem was I made it too thin at the edge, that there was a slight glinting, which it's still sharp, but because Harvey Dean, the guy who was there, who was testing me, he stopped. He says, Alex, I wish I could say this passed. And he said this so the crowd could hear. So I wish I could say this passed, but because I see this, I can't let this pass. And he says, everyone, I just want to let you know that the margin of error on this was so thin. He said, just, we're talking something that's almost imperceptible. And he says, if I hadn't looked at it just right, I would not have noticed. But he says, because I noticed, we can't let you continue with the testing for the next half, which is you put your knife in a vise and bend it 90 degrees and it survives, you know. And was I bummed? Absolutely, I was bummed. But you know what I did? I made a whole post about it, post pictures of the failure and all that, and everything. I wasn't going to hide the fact that, hey, I failed this test. You know, I let people know. I think the post starts off with, let's talk about failure and how do you accept it. You know, it's that's that kind of thing I'm talking about there. You know,
I like that. You know, having that openness and that vulnerability, especially for people who are being looked at by others. You know, you recognize, I'm sure, that there are people that have seen you on the show, that have followed you on YouTube or Instagram,
yeah,
who look up to you. And being perfect at every moment is great for the aspiration, but not for that yeah, identification. Like, they can't necessarily feel like, oh, I'm like this guy. And I think that opens doors. And I've seen this with people that I follow. When I see them at their most human, I realize, oh man, you know, I identify with that. It's almost like you make a deeper connection with people whenever you're able to see that openness and vulnerability. So hopefully, you know, someone out there listens to this and recognizes. And I try to keep this in mind because, of course, I have my podcasts, YouTube channels, Instagram, you name it. And sometimes I spend so much effort trying to put out this perfect image. As an example, I recently posted about anxiety and depression. I've never talked about it openly, but like, these are things that I struggle with in my life. And the message that I was trying to convey is that it's okay to not be okay. Like, that is part of the process. There's nothing wrong with you if you have these situations that are perhaps holding you back or making you feel a certain way. Which, by the way, an aside, I love Imagine Dragons, and they have a song in their latest album called "It's Okay to Not Be Okay." Anyway, for whomever likes them. But I think it's important for us to see that from people, especially people that we follow or admire, people that we want to emulate in one way or another. That finding that glinting, is that what you called it?
yeah,
Finding that occasional glinting on the edge is important.
yeah. And I've been pretty transparent about, you know, failures. Like, you know, I'll talk about it. Like, I had a knife I was doing for a customer, and it's an integral knife, so the blade slots for the little crap. I got one right here.
Oh, nice.
This is made by a friend of mine, but it's a bar of steel and then a little round bar, and it fits right up to the handle, and it's pinned down in here. Well, the knife that I was doing, somewhere in the night, the jig slipped off, and the epoxy that holds the knife in there, you know, well, it doesn't really hold it in there. It kind of makes it waterproof, and it holds it to a point. It separated and it came out because of the epoxy's like expanding a little bit. It pushed the blade out of the handle, and I came back the next day because it takes like 28 hours to set, and it was gapped about, I don't know, a 30 seconds of an inch all the way around.
Oh.
On an heirloom fit knife, which, you know, should never have that at all. You know, like, and I was like, all right. And I posted on my story with like fancy Baroque music in the background, like it was like mysteries, not like a what's the name of that show? Like a Masterpiece Theater, you know.
Yes.
And I was like, tonight on Forging with Alex, watch me fail. Stay tuned. And then I just launched into like why I failed, and the customer was following, and he's like, oh damn. I was like, that sucks, because he knows it's his knife. And I was like, he's like, don't worry, I've already started another one. And he was like, wait, what? And I was like, no, I'm already got the other one glued up and pinned together. It's gonna happen. And I shipped that out to him yesterday, finally.
Nice.
So I got it out to him. He's actually another bladesmith, which is really cool when I have other knife makers buying my stuff. But I'm transparent. I'm like, hey, look, this failed. Here's why it failed. Or here's something that failed and I don't know why. Anyone care to weigh in? Like, what was the problem here? And sometimes I get good answers. Sometimes I get, why'd you even get involved in the conversation type answers? But it's just part of the conversation. It's like, it's to drop back into the other half of my life in a lodge, getting prompted by someone who doesn't know the work properly, and then you're the one being prompted by the person who should not be prompting to begin with. That's the kind of exactly what I'm talking about. So that's the kind of stuff that I deal with too when I pose those questions online.
For sure. I was very pleased to find out that Brother Alex is a member of the same fraternity that I belong to. We're both Masons. And to answer your question, we're free and accepted down here in Florida.
Okay, there you go.
So yeah, hopefully one day we, as we say in the Caribbean and Latin America, hopefully one day we get to adorn columns together.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So brother, I want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate the insight you shared with us and the inspiration. Alberto, do you have anything that you want to know from Alex before we proceed to close?
It was fantastic listening to your experience, because as number one, as a fan of the show, really appreciate it so much. Thank you for sharing that with us. There were so many parallels that I take from that show, and that inspired me to write that essay, the piece article that I wrote. And it's because, in Christianity, we had this you're made out of clay, and the Lord renew me, make me new out of clay. But what if in reality we're just not clay but metal? And I'm always thinking about that, and it's always the getting in the fire and getting pounded by experiences and over. And so I just admire the work you do. I admire the trajectory you're going, and I wish you the best, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to add links to the article in the description. If you haven't read it yet, I encourage you to check it out, because it draws parallels between the art of bladesmithing and our the different aspects of life, and how we deal with pressure and how we handle tension and all that kind of stuff. So it's great. So Alex, thank you so very much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing the rest of your creations. Me and my kids are going to follow you. They had to go to bed earlier. I told them that I was going to try to get them to meet you. That you have two little fans down here now in Kissimmee, but I'll catch you up later at a different time, so you can.
Yeah. Just let me know, man. It's no problem.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. And for those who follow the Gentleman's Brotherhood, thank you again. Thank you so much for our supporters on Patreon. We give some behind the scenes insight as to what we do to help men in the pursuit of becoming a better man today. So thank you as always for listening. Thank you for being a part of the Gentleman's Brotherhood. And until next time, I wish you courage and courtesy.